I remember that day as if it were yesterday. The sun was barely peeking through the smog-filled sky as my son, Grayson, and I walked down a quiet street in a modest neighborhood, heading towards that private school. I was just shy of 30, but I'm sure I looked older, what with my plain clothes and bare face. Grayson, bless his heart, was dressed simply too, but neat as a pin. We walked in silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind, you know? It was the kind where you just understand each other without saying a word. That school, boy, it stuck out like a sore thumb in our neighborhood, known for taking in kids from those well-to-do families in the area. I can still see that security guard's face, all hesitant like when he saw us approaching instead of some fancy car pulling up. I mustered up all the dignity I could and asked to see the principal, my voice steadier than my nerves. That guard, cold as ice, asked what it was about, and I explained we'd just moved to the area and wanted to enroll Grayson. I'll never forget his smirk when he told me lots of folks want that, but not everyone makes the cut. He had the nerve to suggest we try the public school around the corner instead. I stood my ground though, telling him I'd decide where to go and in what order. The principal's office was something else, all leather sofas and fancy trimmings. We were asked to wait while he finished up with another parent. I couldn't help but overhear him laying it on thick with Mrs. White about how honored they were to have her John attending. When it was our turn, the change in his demeanor was like night and day. He barely looked at us, hiding some white envelope on his desk. Yes, he said, like we were wasting his precious time. I introduced myself and Grayson, explaining our situation. The principal raised an eyebrow, asking why on earth I thought there'd be space for us. When I pointed out he just accepted another child, he laughed it off, saying it was just a manner of speaking. Then came the interrogation about my profession. I'm an accountant, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. His response felt like a slap in the face, a common job for a common child. He went on about how they only take exceptional children from influential families, suggesting we try the public school on Parkchester Street instead. I felt my blood begin to boil, but I kept my cool. I told him about Grayson's excellent grades and his awards in art and writing competitions. But it was like talking to a brick wall. He brushed us off, saying he had more important matters to attend to. That's when I lost it, telling him he was underestimating my son for no good reason. Next thing I knew, he was calling for a security to escort us out. As we left, I held my head high, but inside, I was a storm of emotions, anger, disappointment, and a fierce determination to prove them all wrong. I walked out of that office without a word, my head held high but my heart pounding like a drum. I could feel the guard's eyes on me as I passed, still out of breath from rushing up to escort us out. As I headed for the exit, I heard the principal muttering about people getting too bold these days, thinking they can do whatever they please. The sound of a drawer closing told me he'd stashed away that white envelope. A few days later, fate decided to throw me a curveball, and boy, was it a doozy. I got a call from the mayor himself, can you believe it? He told me I was to be the new supervisor for all the schools in the city, overseeing everything from PE programs to computer labs. My company would be funding it all. The mayor asked me to meet with that same principal the next day at 11 sharp. Talk about life coming full circle, huh? When I walked into that office the next day, I was a different woman, at least on the outside. I had on a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my old monthly rent, with shoes and a handbag to match. My hair was all done up, and I'm sure I smelled like one of those fancy department stores. But inside? Oh, I was a mess of emotions, nerves, excitement, and just a hint of sweet, sweet revenge. I asked politely if I could come in, cool as a cucumber. The principal, bless his heart, looked like he'd seen a ghost. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to place where he'd seen me before. I laid out my plans for the school, emphasizing that education should be for everyone, regardless of their wallet size or physical abilities. When I asked if he agreed, you could have heard a pin drop. Then it hit him, I was that same common woman he dismissed just days ago. He started backpedaling faster than a cyclist going downhill, saying he'd be happy to accept my son now. But I wasn't having any of it. I told him I'd be dealing with a different principal from now on. As I left, leaving behind the scent of my expensive perfume and one very stunned principal, I felt a mix of triumph and sadness. Later, sitting in my new office, stirring my tea, I found my mind wandering back to that school. It was like a bad tooth you couldn't stop poking with your tongue. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd always have the worst impression of that place, no matter what happened next. But you know what? That's okay. It's all part of the journey, and honey, what a journey it's been. You know, even after all these years, I still can't shake off those childhood traumas. Here I was, a successful woman, more than I ever dreamed I'd be, but those ghosts from the past? They had a way of creeping back in, like a thick fog rolling in on a clear day. It was those memories that made me put on that little show at the school. I couldn't bear the thought of Grayson falling into that snooty environment, becoming one of them. If I'd shown up looking like I did that day, they'd have welcomed Grayson with open arms in a heartbeat. But that wasn't the point, you see. I wanted to teach them a lesson, even if it was a small one. Unless you've lived it, you can't really understand. My life changed forever on that awful day. A drunk driver lost control of his massive truck, turning it into a weapon that mowed down my young parents as they were cycling on the shoulder. Dad was gone in an instant, and Mom, well, they had to piece her back together. I can barely remember Mom's face from before the accident. All I know is what they managed to reconstruct. I'll never forget that day she came home in a wheelchair, a stranger wearing my mother's voice. It was her voice that let me see the beauty that was still there, hidden beneath the scars. Then came the blindness, another cruel twist of fate. In our tiny apartment in the city, my once vibrant mother became completely dependent on me. Thank God for Mrs. Lewis next door. She was our guardian angel when we had no one else. My grandparents were gone, and Dad's folks were too old and far away to help. So there I was, just a kid myself, forced to grow up overnight. Mom, bless her heart, she was a fighter. Even sick and unhappy, she was determined not to be a burden. She learned to navigate the apartment, adapting to her new reality and managing most of the housework. We still found moments to laugh and play, even in the midst of it all. But often, I'd hear her crying quietly in her room, thinking I couldn't hear. Oh, but I could. School became a whole new battlefield for me. The first few years of elementary weren't so bad. No one understood why I rushed home after school instead of playing. They didn't know about the care Mom needed, the shopping I had to do. If she doesn't want to play, she doesn't want to play, they'd say. Not a single teacher took the time to explain my situation to the class. It was a reflection of the increasingly indifferent world we lived in. I was a dedicated student, smart too, but that wasn't enough to save me from the isolation. As puberty hit, things got even more complicated. My clothes were obviously out of style, hand-me-downs and donations that got fewer and more worn as time went on. I became known as the poor kid at school. Things really went downhill when my classmates found out I was helping Douglas, the janitor at the local church, after school. Douglas, bless him, had no family and his own physical struggles. He was hesitant to accept my help at first, but soon realized what a valuable assistant I was. He started paying me for my work, and I saved every penny, hoping it could help at home somehow. My classmates only found out about my job with Douglas when I was late to school one day, raking leaves in the courtyard. "Get out of here, beggar. You stink like trash," they yelled. I wanted to cry, but I held it in, at school and at home, not wanting to worry Mom. At home, I'd spin tales of a happy, harmonious school life, trying to shield her from the cruel reality. It was a heavy burden for a young girl to bear, but I was determined to be strong for both of us. I wanted Mom to believe that beyond the walls of our tiny apartment, a peaceful and joyful life was waiting for her. As I sat there, sipping my cold, tasteless coffee, I found myself lost in memories of those difficult times that now felt like ancient history. Dylan was the only one brave enough to break through the isolation I faced at school. I'll never forget the day I couldn't participate in PE class because I didn't have the right uniform. My old gym clothes were way too small, and I'd been saving every penny from my lunch money and the little I earned helping Douglas to buy new ones. But I only had enough for shoes, so I had to wear jeans and a t-shirt instead of the proper uniform. Mr. Clark, the PE teacher, an ex-military man who was a stickler for rules, wasn't having any of it. He called me out in front of everyone, asking what on earth I was wearing. I just shrugged and kept quiet while my classmates laughed. Mr. Clark ordered me out of line and demanded an explanation. I tried to explain about the new shoes, but he wasn't interested. He pointed at my jeans and told me to sit on the bench. I protested, saying that my clothes shouldn't prevent me from participating, but Mr. Clark shut me down. He said he decided what was appropriate for class and that I couldn't participate until I had the full uniform. With my head down, I left the gym and sat on a bench in the hallway, my classmates' laughter ringing in my ears. The possibility of getting a complete uniform seemed so far out of reach. I needed to save so much more, and I didn't want to miss PE classes and get a low grade. Not knowing what to do, I hugged my backpack and started to cry. That's when I heard a voice above me asking why I was crying when it hadn't even started raining yet. It was Dylan, the class joker who sometimes skipped classes. He asked if Mr. Clark had kicked me out, and I managed to explain through my sobs about the uniform. Dylan, bless his heart, suggested we go for ice cream to cheer me up. When I asked where we'd get the money for that, he just plopped his backpack down next to me on the bench. He told me crying wouldn't solve anything and asked me to tell him what was wrong. I nodded sadly and explained how I'd grown over the summer and couldn't afford to buy everything at once. Dylan, confident as ever, said he couldn't promise a full uniform but might be able to get his sister's leggings. She'd bought new ones for college, and he was sure he could convince her to donate the old ones. He gave me a pat on the shoulder and insisted on buying me that ice cream. That simple childhood friendship between Dylan and me eventually blossomed into first love. True to his word, Dylan brought not only the promised leggings, but other clothes from his sister too. He was ready to defend me in PE class if necessary, but thankfully, it wasn't needed. The leggings were enough for Mr. Clark, who grudgingly allowed me to participate with a nod. Dylan seemed to enjoy helping me, and in a way, he became my unofficial protector. He'd wait for me in the schoolyard, and we'd walk home together. Dylan was a loyal friend with his own ideas and a different worldview from our teachers, which gave me a sense of security and confidence. As high school graduation approached, my worries multiplied. My grades were excellent, and I was on track to receive an honors medal, but the graduation dance was a source of anxiety. There was no money for a party dress, gifts for teachers, or for the banquet. I knew that apart from Dylan, no one would ask me to dance or spend the evening with me. I dreamed of going to the dance like a modern-day Cinderella, but reality was far different. On graduation day, I quietly asked the vice principal if I could receive my diploma privately before the ceremony. Back in my room, I lay on my bed, burying my face in the pillow, trying to hold back the tears. At 9 p.m., a pebble hit my window. It was Dylan, dressed in a light gray suit with a colorful tie. He said, straight to the point, "Let's go watch the sunrise." When I asked about the others, he replied that they were all celebrating like it was the end of the world. He added, "Grab a coat, we're going boating." We walked the pier all night, sharing kisses in a gazebo, and at dawn, Dylan somehow convinced the marina guard to rent us a boat. In the middle of the river, we held each other and watched the sunrise, the first rays of light cutting through the darkness. In that moment, I felt a happiness I couldn't put into words. I thought about how it would have been if I were at the party, but I was content without a dress, just having Dylan by my side. On this magical night, all our problems seemed to vanish. I was dreaming of college and a bright future. But life still had surprises in store for me. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Dylan was by my side. I had landed a job as a secretary at a prestigious company in New York City, and even Mom seemed happier. However, this period of tranquility didn't last long. Dylan was called up for military service, and I discovered I was pregnant. The news hit like a bolt from the blue, bringing a storm of worry and fear. The situation was complicated. Dylan was in the army, and I, without a stable income, faced the prospect of raising a child alone. Confused and scared by the news, he suggested in a letter that I terminate the pregnancy, believing it was the best decision for both of us given the complicated situation. However, moved by my principles and love for the life growing inside me, I decided to continue with the pregnancy. Knowing I would face the future alone, I cut off all contact with Dylan. I was desperate, looking for a way out of this distressing situation. It was in this state of desperation that my boss, Stephen, found me. He had returned to the office to retrieve his forgotten cell phone and was surprised by my dejected appearance. He approached and tried to get the attention of the young woman staring into space by gently tapping the edge of the cup with a spoon. I startled, and realizing that Stephen didn't understand my situation, I confessed that I was pregnant and soon wouldn't be the same. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Stephen let me pour out my heart. Seeing that I was becoming increasingly distressed, he tried to calm me with kind words and a supportive gesture. Amanda, how fortunate that I came back to the office," he said. As my boss at the company where I worked, Stephen noticed my dedication and strength even in the face of adversity. Upon learning about my pregnancy and Dylan's decision, Stephen offered his unconditional support. He became my pillar, increasing my salary, giving me bonuses, taking care of me during the pregnancy and after my mother's death. Over time, what began as friendship and professional support evolved into a loving relationship marked by mutual respect and admiration. Stephen assumed the role of father figure for my son, Grayson, from birth. He cared for the boy as if he were his own child, providing love, security, and stability. For Grayson, Stephen was his father in every sense except biologically. Their relationship was one of deep affection and respect, and Stephen never made any distinction between Grayson and his own children from a previous marriage. I hesitated at first, but for the sake of Stephen's legacy and Grayson's happiness, I accepted the challenge. A tragic accident took Stephen's life. An unknown vehicle crashed into his car, then ran away, abandoning it as it went down a cliff in flames. Despite the grief and loss, I persevered and continued to stand strong, supported by the teachings and love of Stephen. With the help of my late husband's loyal associates, I began to take the reins of the company. I applied the lessons I'd learned from him and mixed in my own innovative ideas. Under my leadership, the company expanded, diversified its products, and entered new markets. I implemented corporate social responsibility programs, focusing on tech education for underprivileged youth. I knew Stephen wouldn't have wanted to see me doubt myself. After all, he had believed in me. He wouldn't have wanted me to remain a woman ashamed and afraid of my humble origins. My eyes fell on an invitation I'd been ignoring on my desk. It was for a class reunion. No signature. After much deliberation, I made a decision. I picked up the phone and called a famous New York restaurant. Hello, is this Maison Harlem? I'd like to check if reservations for the event are still open. They weren't fully booked, so I asked for details and costs, assuring them I'd pay in full. The first part of my plan was set in motion. Now came the most intriguing challenge. I knew the reunion would be full of surprises. I wondered who had the idea to invite the former school outcast. Dylan would probably be there. In the restaurant's elegant banquet hall, my former classmates, now successful adults, were engaged in lively conversation, curious about each other's accomplishments over the years. As I prepared for the reunion, I reflected on my journey from a difficult childhood on the streets to becoming a successful businesswoman. Every step had been a battle. I remembered the sleepless nights studying while caring for my sick mother, and the exhausting days working and learning with Stephen. Those memories, though painful, were also sources of strength and determination. On my way to the restaurant, I passed places that had marked my life. I saw the school where I'd studied, the small park where Dylan and I used to play, and the church where I helped Douglas. Each place brought back memories of challenges overcome and small victories. I knew that despite everything, I had managed to change my destiny. Suddenly, a strange sound caught everyone's attention. It was a helicopter about to land in the VIP area. Who could that mysterious benefactor be? Lindsay, the former class leader, commented. The helicopter landed softly, and an elegant woman with chestnut hair stepped out. She walked towards the banquet hall, curious glances fixed on her elegant dress and high heels. Who is she? Lindsay asked in surprise, not noticing that Dylan, our old classmate, was mesmerized by the approaching woman. I extended my hands to my former classmates. Hello, everyone. Don't you really recognize me? A tense silence took over the hall. Some still didn't recognize me, while others were beginning to understand. You were the first person I thought of, Lindsay said jokingly. Did you win the lottery or something? If it were me, I'd have run away instead of showing up at a class reunion. I laughed softly. Why is everyone standing? The table is already set. Gradually, the guests began to disperse, still shocked by my transformation. The banquet continued in silence. No one knew how to react to the surprising change in their former schoolmate, now a successful and elegant woman. As the center of attention in the elegant restaurant's banquet hall, I decided to break the spreading silence. With a champagne glass in hand, I stood up and asked for a toast. I apologized for missing the beginning of the reunion and everyone's stories since graduation. I hoped I could still hear them, though. As a latecomer, I wanted to share a bit about myself first. I expressed gratitude for the school of life I'd faced since childhood. It gave me the strength and resilience to overcome challenges after my husband's death. I dealt with grief without giving up, kept my sense of self, moved forward with determination, and succeeded in the business he started. Yes, I was a widow now, but I had a wonderful son who was also studying at our alma mater. I contributed not just to our school, but to many schools, as much as I could. Every experience, even negative ones, had value. I thanked everyone for unknowingly being my teachers. I toasted to the reunion, wishing everyone not a peaceful life, that's impossible, but one that would strengthen us and make the world a better place. After my toast, I took a sip of champagne. In the silence that followed, spontaneous applause broke out. My former classmates, once distant and hostile, were now applauding the elegant woman in the dusty pink dress. The atmosphere in the banquet hall transformed, and conversations and memories resumed. Finishing my champagne, I leaned back in my chair, feeling I'd achieved a small victory that night. Soft music began to play, and Dylan approached me with an admiring look, inviting me to a slow dance. Another hurdle to overcome, I thought as I accepted the invitation. As we danced, a famous singer's soft voice filled the hall, creating an intimate moment between us. Dylan asked, his voice choked with emotion, why I had decided to continue with the pregnancy back then. I explained that in my family, we always respected all forms of life. My mother and I believed every being had a purpose. Despite facing many difficulties, how could I deny life to a part of myself? That decision showed me there was true strength and love by my side. I cherished those memories as the most precious in my life. Dylan, looking at the floor and hesitating to face me, said he wanted to meet his son. I asked him why, telling him the boy had a loving father, and Dylan's presence wouldn't change that now. Unlike me, the boy wouldn't forgive him if he knew the truth. I asked if he wanted to teach the child to hate, saying I couldn't allow that. I reminded him he made his choice back then, and every choice had its consequences. Dylan's voice was full of regret as he told me he could never forget me. He said he was the one who sought me out for this reunion, but now he realized it was too late for regrets. He used the metaphor of not being able to step into the same river twice, saying something in him was lost along with my letter back then. I told him not to be angry, that it was time for me to go. I said the restaurant was paid for and they should enjoy themselves. I mentioned I had an appointment at City Hall the next day and said, "Goodbye." With those words, Dylan left, leaving me alone in the banquet hall. With mixed feelings of sadness and relief, I left the restaurant and met the crisp night air. I've overcome another stage, I told myself, feeling the wind caress my face. Despite all the challenges, I knew I had found my strength and my path.